It's 11:01. We wanted to give people time to join us, and since we're recording it, we're going to go ahead since it's also an option to, if you join late, to look at it later. So just to make sure you're in the right place, this is the issues briefing for the 29th annual Chippewa Valley Rally. My name is Scott Rogers. I'm the Vice President of Governmental Affairs at the Eau Claire Area Chamber of Commerce. And we've been working with Chippewa Falls and Menominee Chambers and much of the community to put this year's Chippewa Valley Rally together. So a few things about what's happening today. This is our advanced issues briefing. Tell you a little bit about the rally. We have 97 people joining us this year, which is up a lot from last year. We have 21 teams, and we have 104 in-person appointments with legislative offices. If you're watching the recording, we're recording this during the 11 o'clock hour on Friday, and this will be available on demand later. If you're on with us live today and you have questions as we go along, put them in the chat, and we'll try to answer them as we go along. We will be sending everybody the recording link, and we do have another session coming up at 2 o'clock on Monday that'll be live, and if you are watching this as a recording and you have some questions, you can either email them to me or ask them during the 2 o'clock session on Monday. A few things about getting the most out of this presentation today. If you're going to be one of the guests who is giving part of the presentation, feel free to leave your camera on, and we will spotlight you when you're part of the program. If you're not going to be one of those speaking today, we'd encourage you to leave your camera off just for effectiveness and bandwidth and those sorts of things. So what I'm going to do in this session, I'm going to very briefly review some logistics for Wednesday, but our main purpose is to talk about the issues and sort of give you a briefing on those as we go along. Emily Johnston and Mallory Williams, our UWEC political science interns, have been working on the rally very diligently. We do have the 4- and 5-person teams set up now, finalizing which teams will be visiting which legislative offices. Each team will have an experienced leader, and we've done our best to have a mix of communities and organization types on each team. So we will have a couple more communications coming to you between now and next week. In fact, quite shortly, either today or Monday. And that is, you'll receive an email either from Mallory or Emily with your team and information about your legislative visits. That'll be coming separately. So you have a little bit of advance information about that. And then you will be getting an email from me with some of the final information about the schedule of the rally and details for enjoying the day. And then, as I mentioned earlier, at 2 o'clock on Monday, we will have a live political experts panel with Bill McCoshen from Michael Best Strategies and Sean Paff from Paff Strategies. They're two seasoned political observers from each side of the aisle who will give us a little bit about the lay of the land in Madison these days politically, advice for being effective in communicating with policymakers, and it'll be another chance to ask questions about the day and about the program and about the issues. So if you'll bear with me just a moment, I'm going to kind of go through the schedule for everybody so you know what's going to be going on, and then we'll get into the issues discussion. The day is February 22nd. We do have a few people coming in the night before, and there are two options to get there. One is to ride the bus same day. We have about 40 of our participants doing that. And if you're riding the bus, we're going to ask you to be at the Prevail lobby at the CVTC Health Education Center at 617 West Claremont between 6 and 6:15 in the morning. We have a coach bus going to Madison, and you will be getting an email from me that'll have a map of where to park and details about riding the bus. We will have some coffee and light refreshments at the departure point. If you're getting there on your own, and whether you're coming in that morning or the day before, we'll be at the Best Western Premier Park Hotel. It's at 22 South Carroll Street in Madison. If right now you're signed up to make your own transportation, I will mention that we do have a few seats still left on the bus. So if you'd like to do that, just be sure you get in touch with us by Monday. We do recommend the attire be business attire. So for instance, a suit and tie for men and whatever that might translate into for business attire for women as well. So what's going to happen in Madison on the 22nd? We do have an optional session at 8 a.m. for those who do arrive early. We're going to have Transportation Secretary Craig Thompson and some of his key staff there to talk about transportation issues. We expect the bus to arrive around 9:30 or so, and between 9:30 and 9:45, we'll ask everybody else to check in with us who didn't either ride the bus or come for the 8 o'clock session. We will start with a 10 o'clock session with our local legislators. We have at least 5 of them joining us to talk about what's going on. We'll let your group get together before we depart for the Capitol. When we get over to the Capitol right around 11, we'll take a group picture in the rotunda. And then you'll have your first 2 small group meetings that morning. We'll be back at 12:30 at the top of the park at the Best Western for a keynote election with Governor Evers. And then we have 3 small group sessions in the legislature in the Capitol with legislators on Wednesday afternoon. At 3:45, we have some key officials from cabinet departments. We'll have that information in your schedule. We have a closing reception from 4:30 to 6, and then the bus will leave back for Eau Claire at 6:15 if you're riding the bus. So that's a quick recap of the schedule. And as I mentioned, we'll be sending out information to you with repeating all of those so that you have that specific information. So we're looking forward to all of you joining us. And what we want to do now is take a few minutes to talk about the issues. We did send you links ahead of time for the issue statements, and a couple things I'll mention about how we develop the issues. First of all, they are a consensus among the community. So we spent some time between the fall and January working with the Chambers of Commerce, getting input, and coming up with the issues that we present at the rally. As you know, this is the 29th annual rally, so we've been at this a while, and it's worked out pretty well in the past. We do need to indicate that when you are visiting a legislative office as part of a team, it is important that you stick to the rally issues and the rally positions. If you do want to take advantage of being in Madison and there's anything else you want to talk with a legislative office or a policymaker about, we do ask that you do that separately and not in your capacity as a delegate to the rally. You will be receiving an issues book, and you'll be able to leave that behind at each office, and your team leader will be taking care of that. The nature of the issues that we have, some of them are very specific asks, something we specifically are asking the legislature and state government to do. Others, we're really highlighting an issue that's important to our businesses and our communities and a general statement of what needs to be accomplished. But because we're early in the session, sometimes specific issues or bills are still being proposed. And so we don't necessarily have a specific bill that we are endorsing, but we will certainly watch those things. And then before we get into the issues, I'll just mention the budget process for any of you that might be new to this. The governor actually gave his budget address earlier this week where he proposed how the state should spend its money over the next 2 years. Legislature will consider that. The Joint Finance Committee, which includes 12 members from both the Assembly and the State Senate, will then draft a budget. They will have some hearings in this spring. And the goal is to have a budget enacted and signed by the governor by July 1st when the 2-year fiscal year starts. One other thing that's relevant is that the budget that's been proposed so far is the operating budget. There's also a capital budget, and we understand that that's going to be coming out. The governor's proposal for that will come out on February 22nd. So that's basically the process. So let's talk a little bit about issues. And I'm going to share my screen off and on, and so hopefully that will work. And then we have some guests. We're going to expand a little bit on each of the issues and give you some background about those. So if you went online and you took a look at the issues that we have posted on the website, and these are the same statements that you'll have in your booklet, I'm actually starting out with those issues that are very specific. So the two that we're asking to be in the capital budget this year are the completion funding for the UW Eau Claire Science and Health Sciences building, which has been endorsed by the Board of Regents and is included in their budget request, and UW Stout's Heritage Hall renovation project, likewise, that has been requested by the Regents. And both of these projects are very important for workforce and other healthcare and our economy in the area. And this is a case where the rally is specifically asking for these to be approved. So what I'm going to do, you should hopefully have you looked at this, but we encourage you to go to the website and look at these, and then we'll be sending you the WSHS booklet as well. But I want to welcome a couple of guests to talk about, we'll take those in the order that they're on the website. So we have UW Eau Claire Chancellor Jim Smith and Mike Carney, who is the Assistant Chancellor for Strategic Partnerships and Program Development. And we'll have them spotlighted, and I've asked them to add some remarks here and expand a little bit about why this is so important in this budget year to get this approved.
All right. Thank you, Scott. Jake Grassi gave me some notes and bullets to highlight. Otherwise, I'd probably take up all your time on this. So appreciate the strong support we've had from the business community for this project. A little bit about Phillips Hall. Original construction started in 1961 with an addition put on 1967. It really was an inadequate building when it was built, talking to alums from that era. It was not really set up to do the kind of hard science and research that our institution has grown to be. 38% of our students are STEM majors. 38% are STEM majors. So they're heavily using this building day in and day out for their work. The university has been building on its core sciences. So part of the Workforce Innovation Grant is we have another 6 STEM majors coming online in the next couple of years, and we have more in the pipeline. Part of that is our goal to double and then ultimately triple the size of our nursing program. The Workforce Innovation Grant will increase by 60% the size of the nursing program on the Eau Claire campus. If I include Marshfield, it's about a 42% increase, but it's significant. And the first 2 years of nursing are spent in that laboratory building, getting their core requirements out of the way. The new building, I think, will further drive the demand for those programs. Frankly, we haven't been able to expand many of our programs because we just don't have the footprint to do it. Because we only have one building, it's expensive. Most other UW schools have multiple buildings dealing with the sciences. Replacing a massive building with a larger building is very expensive, but it is also the most cost-effective way to do it. The new building will be principally laboratory spaces. There's a few classroom spaces, obviously some offices, but the vast majority of the space are actually wet laboratories. Most of the science classroom stuff will actually be taught in other buildings, and that's all been worked in. That's more effort on the faculty. Phase 1, and we were originally told to break this building in half because it was too dang expensive by system, was funded in 2019. It had $109 million as a down payment with $1 million for planning, so a total of 110. Inflation, of course, has dramatically increased the cost of the building. So we're seeking $231 million based on DOA's requests. We've already made significant tens of millions of dollars of cuts to this building. Mike has led that planning process with our faculty. The project is shovel ready. We're at about 90–95% completion of the final design documents. We expect by the end of the academic year, and when this budget is adopted by July 1, we will have construction documents. According to initial feedback from DOA, they believe that we could go to bid as early as November, and we could be breaking ground in a little over a year from now. It would take 2 years to complete. In addition to the building aspect, there's $13.7 million being funded by Mayo Clinic Health System to purchase 10,000 square feet of integrated space between the 5 floors of the building. It is a brick and mortar project, and our building is in danger of failure. So that is essential, but it is also essential to leverage the partnerships that we've been developing. We have a list that we'll be updating, but it was well over 300 businesses and other organizations that have taken advantage of the research or testing space in the existing facility. So the project is, you hear a lot about Mayo Clinic, but we have a lot of mom and pop organizations, many nonprofits, and mid-sized businesses who are getting access to the building and the work that's coming out of it. We know that these are the jobs of the future. This institution has been continuing to evolve its program offering, and this building is a linchpin to those efforts. We expect to break ground again late next spring, and the building would be then ready for occupancy summer, starting with fall of 26 classes. So again, we have a project that's ready to go. Mike, anything you'd want to add to that?
Just to doubly reinforce the fact that this will be shovel ready in the summer and ready for the phase 2 funding to be received. We spent 2 years designing this building. We're in the final design phase. In fact, yesterday and today, the design team is working with all the departments to put the finishing touches on the lab spaces. So it will be ready to go upon receipt of phase 2 funding.
Yeah, and all of the science buildings in the state have needed to be replaced, and I support the other ones on that list, and I strongly support Stout getting Heritage Hall funded as well. There's not been the appropriate investment in these facilities on the UW campuses. Any questions, Scott, or things you think I should be bringing up?
We don't have any in the chat at this point, but certainly as our teams go into legislative offices and they talk about these kinds of projects, the numbers are pretty big, and the scope of what the regions have asked for this year, how large is it compared to typical years, and what is some of the pushback we might hear if we go into a legislative office saying we want these projects approved? Well,
I think that what we've seen is a huge increase in inflation, and I'm really troubled by that, and I know they'll adjust that. I believe DOA has, and Mike is close to it, and Catherine I see is online, she may have heard it as well. I think DOA was requiring us to do inflation of 8% every 6 months. Is that the right number? And that's a heavy level of inflation. You know, I'm frustrated with the state building process. I will tell you that the Sonantag development has come in under budget. Things can still go wrong. I'm all for reforms in how we do state buildings. But this building is ready to go, desperately needed. I think many of you remember a few years ago, we had a fire in the building. There's no fire suppression in the building. Gratefully, the fire alarms work. And so the fire department is just up State Street. The building, if you walk through the building, anyone who's toured the building is left saying 100% it needs to get replaced. We can't put heavy equipment on any floor except the main floor, and you'll see all of our engineering equipment is on wheels, and we wheel them, and they're stored in the hallways, moved into labs and moving things out of labs in order to accomplish it. We've even got a big aquarium that's not even supposed to be on the whatever the second or third floor that it is, because it's too heavy. The building wasn't built or designed for it.
Mike, maybe just one question for you, because part of your role is the strategic partnerships. And we certainly know the reasons it's important to the university and its educational mission. But how does this project have a broader implication for the region and even the whole state?
Well, the strategic partnership with both Mayo Clinic and Hewlett-Packard Enterprise is a key part of this building. Mayo, as the chancellor said, has contributed $13.7 million to the construction. And out of that, they get about 10,000 square feet in the building. The Hewlett-Packard Enterprise donation of high-performance computing will be a key feature in the building. We're actually going to house that supercomputer in the building. It helps us draw talent to the region. It helps us draw qualified faculty to teach, and it helps us draw students who are interested in STEM to the region. And hopefully, once they get here, they have a great experience and they want to stay in Wisconsin.
All right. Well, we appreciate both of you joining us for this session. You're both also going to be with us in Madison. So if those who are on board today have other questions, there'll be informal opportunities before we head over to the Capitol. So thanks very much. We're going to move on to the Heritage Hall at Stout. And if, yes, Chancellor Frank has her camera on, so we're going to ask Mallory to get her spotlighted here. And we're going to talk about the Heritage Hall. There we go. Chancellor Frank, thanks for joining us today. And like the other project we're talking about, this is one that has broader benefit even beyond the Stout campus. But maybe just a quick recap of what this is about and what kind of benefits are going to come from the state investing in it.
Sure, absolutely, Scott. Thank you. Hello, everybody. So highlights on this building project. This building project is the #1 ranked building project by the Board of Regents in the Chippewa Valley. So we have full support from the Board of Regents. It's ranked #3 overall on the system list for major academic building renovations. It's a $138.9 million project that involves about 133,000 square feet of renovation, and it's renovation of our 1970s home economics building. It also involves demolition of 30,000 square feet of the 1950s Voc rehabilitation building. This is something that is important to this building project. We will actually be reducing our overall footprint, serving twice as many students in the Heritage Hall building and creating more green space on campus. Stout is known for using its infrastructure very responsibly, and so this is an example of us getting more use of a building after a major renovation that will allow for a much improved and efficient building. We started this project, we started the request for this project 15 years ago. And as was just mentioned, the price tag increases every year a building project is not funded. So for every year this building is not funded, expect the price tag to increase by about $10 million. The UW system invested in planning and design funds for this building, and we too are shovel ready as soon as this building is enumerated. This building currently serves about 2,000 students a year, and the renovation on this building will allow us to double that capacity, and we will serve approximately 4,000 students a year through this renovation. We have currently raised more than $10.5 million to support this building project, and that's in the form of programming for the building, scholarship, and operational support. This building allows us to address 4 bipartisan issues. Those issues are workforce, childcare, mental health and wellness, and tourism. And of course, 2 of these issues intersect directly with other Raleigh issues, so it tells a very important story of the Chippewa Valley. Of course, we're seeing intersections with talent attraction and retention and the childcare crisis as listed as priorities in this year's briefing documents. This building houses, among other programs, education, early childhood, and our Child and Family Studies Center. And there is not one conversation with small, mid-size, or large manufacturers that does not include a discussion about childcare. And we know that workforce issues and making sure we are able to retain a vibrant workforce, we need to think about all of the things that go into that workforce. And childcare is one of those issues. All of our counseling programs, as well as all of our counseling services, will go into this building project. And important to note is that graduates from our counseling programs are not pre-health or pre-med students that require more schooling upon graduation. Our students are qualified and credentialed to enter the workforce and to fill high-need jobs in counseling immediately upon graduation from UW Stout. Hotel, restaurant, and tourism management, along with unique programs like golf enterprise management and real estate property management, food science, nutrition, and dietetics are all in this building. We have a lot of workforce data. So just ask Stout about what the demand is for these programs and we can tell you. So we have we've been looking very carefully at the 2032 Wisconsin Job Outlook Study. And it shows high demand for all of the academic programs in the Heritage Hall building. So a couple of call outs. Again, important to this rally. The childcare workforce is predicted to be up 10% in terms of job postings by 2032. And mental health and wellness postings will be up by approximately 18%. So the graduates we're producing that are taking classes in this building, majoring in programs that are housed in this building, are very important to the future workforce of the state. And with respect to Stout, we are Wisconsin's Polytechnic University. We are leaders in the UW system as well. With respect to post-graduation employment, our employment rate has stayed at 98% plus for a very long time, and that's 98% plus employment within 6 months of graduation from Stout. Our graduates have the highest starting salaries of any of the UW institutions in Northwest Wisconsin, and almost 60% of our graduates remain in Wisconsin post-graduation from Stout. So what does this mean? It means that this academic building renovation will allow us to serve twice as many students across high demand fields. And with our employment rates, the majority of our graduates will be immediately employed within the state of Wisconsin following graduation, requiring no additional schooling or training to enter high demand fields. And that is why this building is so important to Stout, but it's also important to the system, and it's also important to the future of our state. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Chancellor Frank. We don't have any in the chat, but you mentioned Stout's position as the Polytechnic University. What's the sort of quick explanation of what that is and how that's different?
Yeah, absolutely. So we function according to 3 educational tenets. Remember these 3 things when you're thinking about what is a Polytechnic University. We believe in applied learning. That means we have 3 times as many labs and studios on campus than we have classrooms. We believe in a hands-on, minds-on approach to learning that prepares our students very well for the workforce. So our second educational tenet is career readiness. So I talked about our employment rate. That is very important to Stout's philosophy of learning. We think about the student upon the point of entry, not just when they cross that stage at graduation. Our success is measured by the employment post-graduation. And we do all of this well because of our strong collaboration with business and industry across the state and beyond. So all of our programs at Stout, all of our academic programs have what is called a program advisory committee that is filled with business and industry experts who advise us on our curriculum, and they also advise us on our infrastructure. So do our classrooms, do our labs, do our studios have the equipment that our students are going to need to understand when they enter into the workforce? So think of applied learning, career focus, and collaboration, and that describes the Polytechnic experience.
All right, thank you, Chancellor. And this is a valuable additional information as similar to the UWC people. We have several folks from Stout, including you, who will be attending the rally and helping us visit with legislators, and you'll be around to answer questions there. And I think it's worth mentioning that one of the strengths we have in our area, I personally have been to probably 20 Chippewa Valley rallies, and we have really strong economic drivers from our state universities as well as Chippewa Valley Technical College, and the relationship between them as well with articulation agreements and the unique advantages we have from them. So we appreciate that, and thanks for joining us today. We're going to move on. I'm going to share my screen one more time and talk about one of the next issues. And we mentioned that we have a few that are specific issues. And the other thing that we do, we don't just go to Madison asking for things. When we do ask for action on the part of state government and the action comes, we like to say thank you and to talk about that. And one of the issues we brought each of the last 2 years was some excess state land in Chippewa Falls that could be used for economic development, and the fact that they're short on land. And we've gotten some good news in that front. And so I'm going to bring on Allison Wisniewski, who is the CEO of the Chippewa Falls Chamber of Commerce. First of all, Allison, well, you've been to a rally before. In fact, a few years ago, you and I sat next to each other on the bus on the way down. That might be when I first got to know you, and you became CEO late last year for the Chippewa Falls Chamber. So welcome to that role. And what can you tell us about the state land issue now?
Thank you, Scott. Yes, I remember sitting next to you too. So I'm glad that was memorable for both of us. So this is really a chance for us to say thank you. After many years of discussion with the help of last year's Chippewa Valley Rally, the state sold the city of Chippewa Falls approximately 70 acres of excess state land for development. And this has been really a priority for the city of Chippewa Falls and for the chamber for more than 20 years. So this is really momentous that we get to say thank you for this. This land is just north of Highway 29 and south of Park Avenue, which is adjacent to the Highway 29 and 178 corridor. It is different than the land that many of you might be aware of, heard in the news recently, that's being developed where Festival Quick Trip and Culver's is going. So it is a different portion of land. If any of the attendees of the Valley Rally are meeting with Senator Jesse James or Representative Rob Summerfield, we would ask that you please give them a special thank you. They really helped us navigate the process and led our area legislators to advocate for this land to be sold to the city of Chippewa Falls. The city of Chippewa Falls is working with the city council on the next steps to make this land available for development. And the city and the chamber will also continue to work with DOA to address the remainder of the parcels, which is more than 100 acres that DOA has deemed excess state land. We're not ready to add that to the ask list for this year's Valley Rally, but it is something that we are talking about and will be talking about with DOA. So just wanted to make that aware that will be maybe a next step that you'll be talking about or you'll be hearing about as we look to that parcel of land. So really, this is a great 20-year thank you, and just really a thank you to legislators for making this happen.
And Allison, in the booklet that's actually be printed, it's not on the website, but we have a little map that shows where this parcel is. But maybe you could just describe for us again where that is and what you think it might be used for.
Sure. So this parcel of land is, like I said, just north of Highway 29 and south of Park Avenue and adjacent to the 178 corridor. So right now there's lots of dirt that's being moved across from that parcel, which is where that Festival Quick Trip and Culver's, but currently there is a fire station that's there, that's across the street from this parcel of land. So as you mentioned too, of the city of Chippewa Falls and our community is looking for available land. So there is discussion of how that might be, what that might be used for, and that, the conversations that we've talked about, whether that's for industry, business, and or residential, that will be something that the city council will determine what the best use of that land is, and then we'll be determining that moving forward.
Right, terrific. Thanks, Allison. We always like to have good news. So
yeah, thank you.
You're joining us with that. So we're going to move on to the next issue, and before I do that, I am going to mention that I did have one question come in, and I meant to mention it in the schedule. You may have noticed if you looked at your calendar that Wednesday is also Ash Wednesday. And so if you're thinking ahead to what we might be having for lunch at the Lunch with the Governor, we are having what the hotel tells us is a very popular fish dish. So you'll be able to enjoy that day if you were wondering about that as well. So under the overall category of economic development and tax reform, this is one, if you've been following state government and some of the discussions in politics, there's a couple areas that have been getting a lot of discussion. I think we're early in what might be happening, but they're all being taken very seriously. And so we have a statement there to really encourage those discussions to continue. That is to consider tax reform initiatives that would eliminate or significantly decrease the state income tax burden to make us more attractive to talent, as well as to address the squeeze on local governments with outdated funding formulas, things like declining shared revenue, little ability of cities to increase revenues, and really only having to go to property taxes as well as the outdated school aid formula. So those are there to encourage those discussions to continue. We're not in a position to say exactly what should be done, but we know there are serious discussions going on. And some of you were probably at, if you were in Eau Claire, the Eau Claire State of the City address this morning, where some of the challenges for municipalities came up, and we hope we'll see some action there as well. We're going to move into workforce development, and a couple issues. The first issue, I'm going to call on my colleague, Kaylin Winiger, who is our Vice President of Workforce Initiatives and becoming Vice President of Investor Engagement here at the Eau Claire Chamber. So let's bring on Kaylin, and she's going to talk a little bit about the talent attraction issue. Kaylin?
Thanks, Scott. Yes, for the last couple of years, we have been going to the rally talking about the importance of statewide talent attraction. So there are two parts to the workforce development piece, which is to continue the push to state leadership for talent attraction and retention to the state of Wisconsin. Many of you are aware that there are 2 jobs for every 1 person who is job seeking right now, and those are the people that are job seeking. So there's a really big push to try and fill as many jobs as possible so that we can continue to grow economically across the state of Wisconsin. So we would really love to see continued leadership in this area, whether it's resources and time and just attraction to the state as a whole, potentially even for our remote workforce here. And then a thank you to Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation for allocating some funds toward regional talent attraction efforts that are happening across the state. A huge thank you for that. This is actually something that happened at last year's rally. We had the opportunity to talk to some representatives from the WEDC, putting some money out for those who are doing this successfully across the state. So we would love to see continued efforts like this for those of us who are kind of working on this regional approach for the state of Wisconsin to succeed in workforce attraction.
So Kaylin, Wisconsin has a good story to tell. And so that's really what we're after here, so we can bring more people here to fill our workforce, right?
Yes. Yeah. The state of Wisconsin has a lot of great attraction. We would love to continue to tell the story of why it's a great place to live and work and play and be, whether you're a family or an individual considering moving to the state of Wisconsin, or if you're here and you want to bring others along. And so we're just looking for additional support in those areas.
And I'm going to ask Kaylin in a minute to address another issue. As we move into that, one of the issues that is also under workforce, and these are all interrelated and some of them come up in other areas, and that is addressing housing supply and affordability. We know in our regions that we have a housing shortage. This is actually across the state, and that relates to the workforce crisis, not enough places for people to live. And there are some solutions being worked on there. There were a number of bills actually passed in the Assembly last year that did make it through the Senate. Those will be coming up again. And some of our legislators locally, such as Representative Summerfield and Representative Armstrong, just to our north, have been leaders in this area. And I did want to mention, after Allison talked, and I didn't do it, but both Senator James and Representative Summerfield will be at our opening session. So we'll have a chance to interact with them directly, plus each of them will have a team visiting their offices. So housing supply and affordability is a critical issue, and we would like to see the legislature. There's some local initiatives going on with those, but there are some state role as well too. So we're emphasizing the importance of doing that. So Kaylin, I'm going to go back to you again too, and we were just talking about this morning, but childcare has really emerged as a significant issue too, and not necessarily an even easy one to solve. So why are we bringing this to the rally, and what kinds of things can we bring to lawmakers to talk about here?
Yeah, no one on this call is a stranger to the fact that workforce has been the #1 issue for the Chippewa Valley for many, many years. But what we've really started to work hard on is what specifically under workforce are the challenges for our area, and that's transportation, housing, like you talked about, Scott, and now childcare. When I first started this job 4 years ago, working on workforce issues, childcare was not a word that most employers were talking about. Now it's one of the main things. So our chamber has been heavily involved in kind of navigating this issue, what resources currently exist for our area, Where are we lacking? What are the gaps? Right now, Eau Claire and Chippewa, Eau Claire is in a 40% childcare desert and Chippewa is in a 60% childcare desert, which means we just do not have enough childcare availability at all for the slots that are needed for the people who need care in our area. And that isn't even touching the affordability of childcare at this point. So really, it's critical that we continue to talk about the need for childcare support. Outlined in the issues is the fact that we need to address affordability and availability, but also addressing the business model that is childcare right now is not sustainable. And I know that the governor did cover this in his recent address. And so we would really just like to hit home that this is a critical need and issue for the Chippewa Valley area. Yeah, I think those are kind of the main things, Scott.
And we have a couple of thank yous actually in that area as well.
Yeah, we did receive some COVID relief dollars with the child care counts. Unfortunately, that program is ending as of January 2024. Child care counts is a program that allows centers and family care to increase wages and or put money towards operations within business. And so while it's been wonderful, most of our area child care centers have only been able to slightly increase their wages. For instance, prior to COVID, they might be paying $9 an hour for workers, which was the average in our area. And now we're seeing more like $12 to $13 an hour, which still isn't really livable. The great disparity with this is that we have some of the most highly educated people that are working as early child care workers. They're the most educated and lowest paid, similar in that teacher track that we typically see. So we would really love to see child care counts continued. And then the Dream Up Child Care Supply grant and Partner Up programs, which are under Project Growth with Department of Children and Families. We'd really like to see those continued as well for some of those sustainable homegrown projects that are needed across the state.
All right. Thanks, Kaylin. Important issue. And I will mention that anybody has questions, you can put them in the chat. We have had Jake Rassy from the university and Claire Lindstrom add some additional information in the chat you might want to look at if you have a chance to do that. So appreciate it, Kaylin. So we don't run out of issues related to workforce because we find that there are a lot of things that affect our ability to address workforce. And another one we want to talk about is occupational licensing. And if you take a look at the issues, you see that we're asking about the backlog there and harmonizing regulations and other things. And I want to introduce Michelle Farrell from the Chippewa Falls Chamber. And Michelle has been looking into this issue and has some things to add for us as we understand that and talk to lawmakers. So Michelle.
Great. Thanks, Scott. Professional licensing has become a really big issue in Wisconsin. It turns out that there is a humongous backlog with the Department of Safety and Professional Services, and people are waiting months in order to receive their license or to even renew an existing one. I did a little bit of research with the help of all the documents, with the state. It turns out 250,000 licenses are provided by this department. It covers 240 different professions, everything from barbers to plumbers, nurses, trauma surgeons, social workers, therapists, everything in between. Lots of different things that are being licensed. The department fields between 5,000 and 10,000 calls every week, which is an enormous amount of phone calls that they have to work through. So there is this incredible backlog. It is reducing and hindering the number of people that are in our workforce. So a couple of different things happened this week. On Tuesday, the Joint Legislative Audit Committee voted to direct the Legislative Audit Bureau to do an examination of the agency to find out what's causing all the delays. And then obviously the second thing is on Wednesday, the governor proposed his budget, and he proposed significant resources in this area to address the issues. In his proposal, he's proposing 80 new positions in that department over a 2-year time period. As a reminder, we're not advocating for any specific thing or any specific proposal. What we are advocating for is that the department address the issues to figure out how we can better license and get rid of this backlog to get people to work. And one additional thing that I want you to think about when you're talking to legislators is that sometimes when we are attracting people from outside of our state to come work and live here in Wisconsin, sometimes our licensing and the state that they're coming from, they're not harmonized. The licensing doesn't equate. So it takes extra time, extra effort for someone who wants to move to Wisconsin to work here, to work through that process. And again, if you can imagine the backlog, sometimes people will choose not to move here for that very reason. So that, in a nutshell, is what's happening with that department. And we're excited that it is being addressed. We really want to make sure that all of our legislators understand that we know it's an issue here in the Chippewa Valley, and we really want them to figure out a way to get rid of the backlog and get our people to work.
So Michelle, to understand that one topic you brought up then, so somebody could move here with 10 or 15 years experience in a particular profession, and it might be that they can't start practicing right away. Is that right?
Correct. And we're not saying that they shouldn't go through some licensing at the Wisconsin, in Wisconsin, but the length of time it takes for that to happen is really a deterrent at this point.
Okay. Thanks. That's very good information. And I'll just remind everybody, I guess we're doing such a good job that we're not getting a lot of questions in the chat, but we'll be glad to have them later as well. So I'm going to share my screen one more time, and did want to cover one more area, and that is infrastructure. And some of these are encouraging continued work in some areas and solving some issues and making some compromises and moving forward in some other areas. And so among our asks in infrastructure are to prioritize continued expansion of broadband access to unserved and underserved areas. I think it's pretty clear this is a priority across the state at all levels of government, and there is a lot being done, but we certainly want to encourage that because of how critical it is to have access to broadband. It's in a lot of ways as important as it is to have electricity or telephone service. Also, an issue we brought last year was to continue to build out electrical vehicle charging infrastructure in our state, particularly along major highway corridors, particularly for rural areas. Some of the work there had stalled a little bit last year over some politics, and we think it's important for the parties to really work toward the resolution of some of those issues so that we can balance the importance of having public infrastructure, having the infrastructure available, as well as making sure that all parties can work together. There's also an opportunity right now to expand passenger rail service, and it really, at this stage, has to do with qualifying for a federal program. So there's not an ask of the legislature at this time, but there is, if you've heard of the bipartisan infrastructure law that was passed last year by Congress, there's a new program in that law that allows communities and departments of transportation to get some federal designation that allows the planning to determine feasibility of new passenger rail corridors or expansion of current ones. And there's actually a deadline coming up from the Federal Railroad Administration to submit those. So we are actually encouraging Wisconsin DOT to submit corridors in Wisconsin that would expand passenger rail service to our communities and bring those benefits. You may have heard that there's some news stories saying that there's concern about any state funding going to this. There's no need for that at this present time. And certainly part of this study would be to determine what the benefits would be. So if state funds are ever asked for it, that there'd be some assurance that there's a return on investment that would be important to our economics of our communities. It is widely accepted that the current corridors that the state has, such as Chicago to Milwaukee, have been very successful, very additive to the the economy of the state and those communities it serves. And so for other areas of the state like Green Bay, the Fox Cities, Madison, Eau Claire, Menominee, and others, that we ought to be looking at how we can benefit from that. And speaking of the bipartisan infrastructure law, we're just encouraging the state to make sure that we are taking full advantage of what the federal government has provided in that area for all of our transportation modes. Kaylin and I were talking a little bit before this session on how long our list of issues are this year. We try to really concentrate on the most important ones, and being a biennial budget year, and also because there are so many things. So for instance, we talked about workforce and all those factors that affect our workforce. There is a lot to talk about this year, so you will have some challenge when you go into your legislative visits in getting through all of this information. So we encourage you to read over the issues, be able to talk about them when you go in. And I'll repeat what will happen at the rally is after we've had a little bit of time to talk to our local legislators, get some of their perspective on how we should be approaching our meetings, that you will be able to meet in your group and talk about who's going to present what issues, how your leader will take you around. But you might be thinking about it as you read this, say, you know, I'm really interested in this issue. It's something I'd be glad to talk about when I'm at the rally. So we promised to keep this under an hour, and it's going to be only a little over 50 minutes. I do want to remind you that you will be getting some communications from us about your team, as well as some of the final details. And then there's going to be one other opportunity to do some preparation for your trip, and that is at 2 o'clock on Monday. We have another Zoom call with Bill McCoshen and Sean Paff, and I think you'll find that very valuable to be thinking about what some of the what's being talked about in Madison these days, what's the relationship between the governor and the legislature, and sort of the lay of the land that I think you'll find very valuable. So we'll look forward to seeing you again at 2 o'clock on Monday. That one will also be recorded and made available afterwards. And for everyone, certainly to see you on Wednesday morning at the rally, whether you can make it for the early meeting with DOT at 8 o'clock or for sure by our general session at 10 o'clock. There is a question about how soon to expect the team assignment email. We've just finished those assignments, so it takes some time because we can't just send one email to everyone. So you'll be getting that email very soon. It'll either be today, but no later than Monday. So you will have a few days to take a look at your teams. And the team leaders have all agreed to do it. They've all done that role before or been to the rally before. So we appreciate everybody who's been on the call today. We appreciate working with our colleagues at the chambers and throughout the community. And especially we appreciate all of you taking the commitment to go. Reminder that we do still have room on the bus if you decide you want to ride with us. Wish everyone a safe trip, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week. Have a great day.